Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the wilds of central Alaska, just northeast of Denali National Park. The area of Ferry lays along the Nenana River and is losing people quickly. In the 2020 census, it was listed as having 17 residents, down almost 50% from the prior census, which indicated 33 residents. Our story doesn't happen in the village, though, as the subjects of our episode traveled 5 miles into the more primitive areas nearby. Common evergreen trees of the area include black and white spruce and Sitka spruce, with stands interrupted by quaking aspen, black locust, and paper birch thickets. In riparian zones, alder bushes provide a dense lower canopy through which trails meander. This area has a rolling topography as it sits on the northern slope of the Alaska Range. The animals of this area include moose and caribou, with the main predators being black bear, wolves, and brown bear. It is in this majestic setting that our episode takes place today. In the fall of 1985, Ben Moore was a carpenter by trade and helped out in civil engineering projects. He had hunted for moose with his 14-year-old son Ty around the Blair Lakes area, with nothing but sore feet to show for it. His friends felt sorry for his lack of success this year, so in a last-ditch effort they offered to accompany them to the area around Ferry to moose hunt. The group had previously dropped a camp trailer to hunt from on the far side of the old metal bridge, and planned to drive across the bridge to hunt on the far side of the river. They arrived at the camp trailer in the early evening, the night before they planned to hunt. About 5 in the morning, the hunters climbed out of bed and hopped into a jeep and a station wagon to drive up the mountain road across the bridge to get to their hunting area. Ben rode with his friend Richard in the jeep, and Ty rode with the other hunters in the roomier station wagon. At a fork in the road, the two vehicles separated and explored the promising area for game. As they scanned the dense scrub brush for the gleaming antlers of a bull moose, they took in the clear sky and fall colors that surrounded them. There were strong gusts of wind, but even this makes for a nice day in Alaska. After a few hours of driving and stopping periodically to glass areas, they decided to pull the jeep up on a ridge and look over the country a bit more. The wind was gusting so strongly that glassing from the jeep was more comfortable, and they could see just about everything they wanted to see. They looked for a good vantage point to park the vehicle and began glassing. As Ben rounded the hill, he carefully navigated the slope and stayed out of brushy areas so as not to surprise any bear or moose. As he emerged into a large clearing, Ben pulled up his binoculars to glass the area. His field of view was quickly filled with a large, brown, fuzzy image. Whatever it was so close his binoculars couldn't focus on it. He quickly took his binoculars from his eyes and felt his heart drop as he could see a large brown bear just 100 or so feet from him. The bear immediately stood up his hind legs, lifting his head above the brush, and began to investigate just what Ben was. It opened and closed its mouth a few times, and bobbed up and down, seemingly unsure of just what to do with this person appearing so close, so suddenly. It apparently made up its mind as it disappeared once again into the brush and got back down on all fours. Ben had studied how to behave around bears, as he was an avid outdoorsman. He knew if he didn't do anything drastic, like screaming or running, the bear may well just amble away. He stood still and focused on relaxing in a desperate hope to somehow convey a non-threatening attitude toward the bear. Suddenly the brush exploded with snapping branches and cracking as Ben watched a brown blur streaking toward him. At his side, Ben carried a .357 Magnum pistol, a single-action revolver. By the time he could pull the gun and cock the hammer, the bear was within arm's length of him. He frantically squeezed the trigger and felt his hand kick in reaction to the shot. The bullet hit the bear square in the chest,
but it didn't stop or even acknowledge the impact of the bullet. As the bear ran past Ben, it clasped its jaws on his right leg and slung him over its shoulder. It then flung him backward, sending him crashing onto a large rock. Just as Ben felt himself land, he also felt the bear biting into his right leg. It hadn't even missed a step in the entire process of throwing him, and was now tearing at the muscle and skin of his right leg. Somehow Ben managed to hold on to his pistol while being flung through the air. He quickly pointed the pistol toward the bear and fired, but it was a clean miss. The stress and adrenaline of the encounter had him shaking and unsure of himself, but the bear was sure of what it wanted to do. The bear's underside was now just above Ben, so he cocked the revolver again and fired into its gut. He saw a huge wound open up in the bear's stomach and blood poured out onto him. The bear became even more enraged with the pain, and it diverted its attack to his head. It locked its jaws onto his head and shook him violently from side to side after picking him up off the ground. Ben could hear and feel the bones of his face cracking in the bear's massive jaws. Then it threw him to the ground, onto his back. For a brief second it stood over him and glared at him, with its head near his and its mouth opened wide. Just as Ben began to move, the bear lowered its mouth toward his head again, but he quickly cocked his revolver and stuck it into the bear's mouth. The bear's jaws closed around Ben's hand and the pistol just as he fired it. The bear didn't drop dead. Instead, it shook a bit and then moved its head from side to side, as if trying to stop the burning from the blast in his mouth. It quickly swiped at the pistol in recognition of the source of its pain, but Ben grasped it firmly now with both hands. The bear slowly turned and staggered its way across the clearing and back into the brush. As the bear disappeared, Ben struggled to his feet. As he stood, his right leg collapsed and he fell back to the ground. Being both tough and stubborn, he climbed back to his feet and firmly stamped his injured right leg into place as if to convince it to work. The bear's teeth had torn his face horribly, and he couldn't see to reload the revolver. Ben was now irritated and mad. He hadn't done anything to deserve such a mauling, and the bear wasn't protecting cubs or a food cache that he knew of. He bellowed a challenge to Bear and declared he had one more round left in his pistol. Ben could do nothing to remove himself due to his injuries, so he waited and tried to gather himself and think about what to do. Richard heard only one of the shots from the revolver and soon appeared at the top of the small ridge. He hollered out optimistically, "Did you get a moose?" But Ben's reply was a disappointing statement. "No, a bear got me." Richard incredulously asked Ben what he said, but Ben's confirmation of the events brought him down to Ben's aid. Upon seeing the damage inflicted by the bear, Richard was shaking and nervous. He helped Ben make his way back to the Jeep and immediately began driving back to the trailer, about 5 miles down the rough mountain road. The men had driven about 100 feet or so before the Jeep quit running. Richard cautiously got out and slid underneath the vehicle while keeping a wary eye out for the bear. He banged on the malfunctioning fuel pump and once again started the Jeep. As they drove along the road, they reached out to the rest of their hunting group on the CB radio, but heard no reply. As is so common in these types of stories, as soon as the Jeep had reached the bridge that crossed the river, they ran into 2 paramedics. They had heard the cry for help over the CB radio and had called for additional help. Just as they arrived back at the trailer, an ambulance pulled up and out jumped 3 more paramedics. The paramedics were met with a gruesome sight. Ben's nose hung loosely from his face. They pushed it back into place and wrapped gauze around his entire head, even covering his eyes. They also put an inflatable splint around his leg before loading him into the ambulance and speeding toward the hospital 5 hours away in Fairbanks. As the paramedics tried to insert an IV to give him fluids, they discovered his veins had collapsed from the trauma and shock of the event. Each time Ben tried to lay down, blood seeped into his throat, causing him to cough and choke. He was forced to sit up the entire drive to the airport. Ben's leg was swelling so much that the splint had to be removed, adding to his pain and discomfort with each bump they hit. The entire ride to the airport, the paramedics didn't give him anything for pain, due to him being in a state of shock. The pain in his leg was overriding any other sense of pain in his face. Richard had to smile as he stared into Ben's shredded face and listened to him complain about pain in his thumb. Upon examination, they found a piece of one of the bear's claws had completely pierced Ben's thumb and protruded through the other side a small distance. Ben endured a 5-hour ambulance ride to Fairbanks Memorial Hospital without pain medications. Upon arriving at the hospital, Ben's head was x-rayed, and he underwent a 4-hour surgery. He stayed in the hospital for 2 more weeks. Over the next 2 years, he would have so many surgeries he has lost count. A plastic surgeon worked on reconstructing Ben's nose over several months, but had a very hard time as all of his facial bones were shattered during the attack. After reconstruction of his nose was complete, he had no feeling in it. Ben thanks God that Ty was not with him and still suffers from nightmares from his bear attack. Ty's presence at the attack would have traumatized him too if he had managed to avoid being attacked as well. The resources I have never indicated the age, sex, or condition of the bear, and didn't indicate if it survived its wounds from Ben's revolver. After reading the research on this bear attack, I am left with several questions. What do you think Ben could have done to avoid this bear attack? Would his rifle have helped him stop the attack? What would have happened if Ben's son Ty had been with him? Do you think the bear survived? I will look forward to reading your responses, so post them in the comments section below this video and let's talk about it.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks.
Today's episode takes us to the frigid north of the Yukon Territory, Canada. Just outside of the town of Whitehorse is some of the most valuable mineral resources in the world. This brings large corporately owned mining operations to the area, and that of course brings jobs. Just about 30 kilometers east of the town is a mining operation near Ross River, owned by Aurora Geosciences Ltd. Just south of Ross River is mountainous terrain, but to the north is lowland dotted with muskeg and many small lakes. The predominant trees in the area include white spruce, black spruce, birch, and lodgepole pine. This area is home to moose, mountain goats, and sheep, with the main predators of this area being wolves, black bears, and grizzly bears. On April 28, 2006, 28-year-old Jean-Francois Page was flagging for the mining company he worked for. This was the first day of his 3rd year of employment with Aurora Geosciences, and his friends called him JF for short. He was originally from Bon Secours, Quebec, Canada, and had come up north for a lucrative job in the mines in 2002. He had embraced a primitive and difficult lifestyle by living in an off-grid cabin without running water while he lived in Whitehorse. Over his brief life, he had done everything from being a census worker in Nunavut to working at Cannes as a film critic. He was a jack of all trades and had embraced the society and culture around Whitehorse. On the day in question, he and 2 co-workers were tasked with marking out some mineral claims in the area for future use by the mining company. They had to carry heavy cables, an axe, stakes, and their GPS system. They routinely worked in the bush and would occasionally have run-ins with bears, but always managed to get out of the confrontation unscathed. They carried too much equipment with them to carry a firearm of any type and didn't pack bear spray either. Spring is a precarious season for brown bears emerging from hibernation. They are just bringing their cubs out of the den, and this is when they are most protective of them. The cubs can weigh only 10 pounds or so and require the protection of their mother from larger boars who will kill and eat the cubs, just to bring the sow back into estrus for breeding. At this time of year, all brown bears are emerging from their dens after not eating for several months and are extremely hungry. This puts them and any human they may encounter in a very tenuous situation. If the bears are prone to view humans as a threat or a food source or surprise them, then the potential for an attack is heightened. The 3 men finished up a few hours of work and began gathering their things to return to their work camp. The 2 men who were working with Jean-Francois had left the area a few minutes ahead of him and were making their way, leaving him behind. Once they arrived at the work camp, they waited several minutes, then a short while for Jean-Francois to get back to camp, but he never did. The men soon grew concerned and contacted a helicopter pilot working at their work camp. The pilot hopped into the helicopter and flew back to the location the men were working. As he hovered over the area, he could see a human body lying still on the ground. He notified ground searchers, and they went in and located JF's remains. Jean-Francois was torn up severely and was the apparent victim of a bear attack. After searching the area for evidence, they found a bear den that had seen sign of 2 cubs having occupied the den. The track evidence told the story quite clearly. When the other men left Jean-Francois, he had deviated slightly from their return path, probably to save some time on the return trip. He had unknowingly wandered to within 5 yards of the brown bear den that hid the 2 cubs. Judging by the track evidence at the attack scene and the wounds on Jean-Francois's body, the attack was sudden, brutal, and immediately fatal. Officials would note that they were certain he died almost instantly upon initiation of the attack. The review of the evidence showed that the sow was surprised by the sudden presence of Paige near her cubs. They were convinced that this attack was a defensive attack, due to his body not being cached for food. Jean-François Page was simply killed in a blitz of an attack, and his body left in the open, uneaten. Jean-François left many friends behind with his passing. They stated that he loved the North and embraced the rigors of hard work. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police and some conservation officers attempted to locate the sow and cubs. They decided that the sow needed to be killed due to the aggression she showed to Jean-François. The cubs were also put down because they were still dependent on their mother for survival. In the aftermath of JF's attack and death, the Yukon Workers' Compensation and Safety Board investigated the circumstances surrounding the incident. They filed 6 charges against Aurora Geosciences pertaining to inadequate training for their employees. The charges claimed that the employees were not aware of the dangers of working in bear country and were not provided adequate protective equipment. The company maintained that employees are always provided with bear spray and bear bangers, which are firework-like devices designed to frighten a bear away. Prior to this attack, the last human fatality due to brown bear attack occurred in 1996 when a female hiker was killed near Kluane. This attack will be featured on our next episode. After reviewing the facts of this incident, I have a few questions for you. Do you think that if his cohorts had waited for him that this incident may have come out differently? Why do you think the men didn't have the bear bangers or bear spray on hand since the company provided them? Do you think the sow charged JF with the intent to predate upon him? Do you agree with the citations of the mining company? I will enjoy reading your responses, so post your comments below and let's talk about it.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode whisks us away to very familiar territory. We're going back to the Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada, and specifically to Opiongo Lake. Algonquin Provincial Park is Canada's oldest park and was formed in 1893. The topography of the park consists of rolling forested lowlands under 1,500 feet in elevation. The land has been shaped by eons of glacial activity, grinding the mountains down into rounded hills with valleys filled with till, or soil derived from ground rock. The trees of the area range from dense stands of jack pine, white birch, and poplar scattered through pine forests. The waters here are extremely productive for fishermen. Common animals of the area include white-tailed deer, moose, and possibly woodland caribou, and a few elk. The predators of this area include lynx, wolves, and black bear. Toward the southern end of the lake is an island called Bates Island. I know what you're thinking. Bates Motel, Bates Island. It is an eerie coincidence, but there is no hotel on this island. In fact, there aren't supposed to be any bears on it either. Opiongo Lake is about 9 miles long, but is only just under 8 miles wide at its widest point. It narrows at the southern end of the lake to just under half a mile wide at Bates Island, but the landmass of the island cuts this width to only a few hundred yards in total. The island sort of forms a land bridge that any animal willing to take a short swim could use to get from one side of the large lake to another. The island is small, only measuring a little over a half-mile long and about 1/10 of a mile wide, but is very long and thin in shape. On October 11, 1999, 32-year-old Raymond Jacoboscus and his 48-year-old companion, Carola Freehy, had just paddled out to the island and began to set up camp. The two had unpacked their tents and sleeping bags after finding a satisfactory place to camp with a beautiful view. The water shimmered as the late afternoon light bounced off the ripples, and the two adventurers were settling in for a relaxing night by themselves. They must have felt very safe on this island, knowing that any animal looking to make its way onto it would have to swim there, and would probably be heard by the couple as it approached. The island seems fortress-like in its isolation, complete with a moat of water for protection. Fall is an interesting season for bears. They're in a state called hyperphagia, which is when they have a ravenous appetite in an attempt to pack on as much fat as they can before heading into hibernation for the winter. They're dependent upon berry yields and an overabundance of food to meet their needs during this time, and sometimes they do not quite get enough calories, and their appetites lead them to easy, alternative food sources. As the two set up camp, a rustling began in the bushes near their camp. As they looked over toward the noise, a very large and inquisitive black bear emerged from them. When a black bear is in predator mode, it doesn't typically run up to its prey. Rather, it puts its head down low and pins its ears back, looking for a hidden avenue of approach. It doesn't usually take a direct line toward its prey, but approaches in an oblique route, as if it were just passing by. It will frequently act oblivious to the presence of its prey in an attempt to convince the prey it's in no danger, but the body language of the bear is very clear to those who understand it. Given that both people were found dead, it is assumed that the bear began by approaching Corolla first, and Raymond stepped in to defend her. The large black bear used its powerful paws to break each of their necks, in a lightning fast and merciful death. After both people were laying dead on the ground, it dragged their bodies into the dense vegetation on the island and did what bear experts call caching. When a bear caches a carcass it plans to consume, it covers the remains in leaves, sticks, and dirt, and then defecates or urinates on them. This acts as a mask to any odors that develop from decomposition of the carcass and lets other animals know that the carcass is already claimed as a meal by the bear. Both Raymond and Corolla's bodies were cached in this manner. For the next 5 days, the bear fed from their bodies and stood guard over them, keeping any possible competition from feeding on them. After a few days had passed, and the two had not made it back to their prearranged check-in point, park police officers were sent out to the island to check on them. When they arrived, they were confronted by a large and now angry black bear who was refusing to leave and clearly claiming the cached bodies as its own. The park officials shot the bear and began their investigation of the gruesome and fatal incident. Raymond and Corolla's remains were recovered and sent to officials for investigation and to complete the process of certifying the circumstances surrounding their deaths. The bear was found to be a young male which weighed in at 308 pounds. This may sound like a very large bear, but given the time of year, he was not. Black bears need to consume between 15,000 and 20,000 calories every day for months on end to reach ideal hibernation weight, and given that a large fish might have several hundred calories, you can easily see it isn't always as easy nor a successful venture for them. Not only that, they need a relatively high amount of sugar in their diet so that their calories are converted to fat, so a bad berry season may negatively affect their efforts in achieving the needed fat accumulation for hibernation. Regarding the attack, a park naturalist referred to this attack as a strictly predatory attack and described it as right off the scale of normal bear behavior. Given the bear wasn't described as emaciated, injured, nor older and declining in health, it is unusual, but it is all too common, as our channel demonstrates. The attack on Raymond and Corolla inspired author Claire Cameron to write a fictional novel centered around a similar plot. It isn't a factual recounting of the attack, but is an interesting story told from a 5-year-old girl's perspective. It may be an interesting read for you. I've linked to it below, so if you like fictional writing, check it out. So after compiling the information surrounding this attack, I'm wondering, do you think this attack was a predatory attack or possibly a territorial attack? Do you think that bear spray or firearms would possibly have changed the outcome of the attack? Did Raymond and Corolla violate any bear-aware precepts? I will enjoy reading your comments, so please post your thoughts in the comment section below, and let's talk about it. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.